Welcome back to the Christmas special of Latest TV News. And I'm Sam Morton, here with Henry Bryant to talk about Brighton's upcoming year, and we make some predictions of how we think it's going to go. So Henry, it's a fast start to January with an FA Cup tie away at Stoke and an away trip to West Ham in the league. On the FA Cup tie, how did you assess that draw away at Stoke?
Well, it was slightly underwhelming, wasn't it? It wasn't the sort of star striking teams that we've got, and because we're so used to playing in Europe now and we're cruising and we're sort of used to doing well against the big teams, it seems like something that will be a breeze for us. I hope that I don't go to bite my words and swallow my pride in that aspect, but I think that it's slightly underwhelming and just a few games that we need to progress with and get through in the best possible fashion, hopefully with a few young players making appearances and even debuts.
Yeah, and I mean the FA Cup itself, Serbi has commented that he wants Brighton to be competitive in every competition, and he was angry when they were beaten by Chelsea in the Carabao Cup. But when you consider the number of competitions they're playing in, the number of injuries, number of suspensions they've had, do you think the FA Cup will take any priority at all?
Well, I think it all depends really, because I don't want any upsets in these next few games in the FA Cup, and I'm sure that De Zerbi doesn't, or neither does his squad or any other fan. But if there was the situation where we did get knocked out of Europe and we were still in the FA Cup, then I think that domino would then fall onto the priority of the FA Cup and doing well in it. And obviously last year we managed to get to the semi-final, lost out to Manchester United on penalties, which was a gutter. And although the FA Cup meant a lot to us last season because of how well we did, I think that the Europa League is just that step ahead right now in the priority list for De Zerbi at the moment.
And as you mentioned, Man United came out on top in that semi-final last year. Is that going to be playing on their mind, do you think, if they were to get to the latter stages? They really want to put that right, because they were so close to making an FA Cup final, and just to win a trophy would be fantastic, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. I think having some silverware would sort of back up the performances that we've been putting in, and also just put a stamp of credibility on us, because we're a team that is pushing to be one of the top clubs. Not in terms of money, not in terms of sort of history, but in terms of just the form right now. And I think having an FA Cup or a trophy similar to that, or even a Europa League trophy, would be something that shows the world who we are, who Brighton and Hove Albion are.
And we've mentioned West Ham as the first league game of the season. It's obviously going to be a tough one, that one. And I mean, just generally going into that month, from what we've learnt this few months, obviously with the injuries and suspensions, who do you think Brighton, what areas do you think Brighton needs to strengthen in the January transfer market if they can?
Well, I think that we need to shore up the defence a little bit. I think that we've got a lot of young players playing at the moment, and despite them doing exceptionally well for us, when we've got that many players injured, you need a few quality starters that are going to be able to secure victories, and not players that might make a few mistakes that will cost us an entire game. And if we've got a run of games coming up every few weeks, almost 2 a week, most weeks, it's going to be hard for us to not have a player or a few players that can step in and be the difference in terms of quality. So I think some defenders would definitely be useful, and I think even a striker, to be honest with you, I think a striker would help and benefit, because although we've got João Pedro that's doing brilliantly at the moment, you need to think of the way that we're performing in general, and hoping that we've got a few more players coming back in terms of Evan Ferguson sort of kind of finding his feet, because he was injured for a little bit. But I still feel like we need someone of a good quality, and maybe use a bit of that Caicedo money to show what sort of team we are and boost that.
Obviously, the future of Dennis Undav is in the air a little bit. He's been out on loan at Stuttgart this season. There's some that think that was a bit of a mistake, letting him leave on loan, when you consider Welbeck's been out for a long period of time. Evan Ferguson's had injuries. Obviously, João Pedro has stayed fit for that entire time, but you do wonder if Undav had still been there, if he'd have actually got the minutes he probably craved when he considered leaving. So, just a word on his future. Would you like to see Brighton bring him back as soon as possible?
I think that he would be great to bring back. The issue with him at the moment is because he signed that loan deal, he also had a release clause in that, which is just over £10 million. So for us to get him back, we've also got to convince the club he's at the moment to basically hand him over. And I think there isn't a lot of chance that that's going to happen, to be honest, because in his last 10 games to recording date in December, he's got 8 goals in 10 games and has been the difference. There was a 2-1 victory on the weekend where his side played and he was able to get a goal in the 72nd minute. So he is making the difference right now, and potentially Brighton could look back at this and think, we have made a little bit of an error there. We didn't really see this sort of happening with injuries to our first team strikers at the moment.
Ansu Fati's obviously been out with an injury, hopefully coming back this month in January. So how important will he be? We're not sure how long Brighton will have him. We presume he will go back to Barcelona at the end of the season. So to have him back this in January, how brilliant do you hope he'll be? Do you really think he'll show his best form?
I hope so. De Zerbi's already said that he isn't at his best just yet, and he always expects more from Ansu Fati, which is fair enough because he's a quality player and a world-class potential player. So for him to do well in the second part of the season would be not only vital for him and potentially rectifying his career, because this is a big test for him being at Brighton. This is a deciding point basically for Barcelona to see how he performs, but also for us because we do really need him to make some of these results go our way in the second half of the season. So my hope is that he finds form, hits the ground running, and to have, I hope, potentially 10 plus goals from him, because that would be the decider, that would be the difference right now. We wanted him to be the difference, but he's not quite yet there. Not quite there yet. Can I redo that bit?
Yeah.
That's so annoying because that was quite good.
Yeah, just start from that sentence again.
What,
if you
not
want to.
quite there yet?
Yeah.
But he's not quite there just yet. I don't think he's there just yet, so we'll have to see.
And just on Evan Ferguson and Kaoru Mitoma, both of them probably haven't been at their best so far this season, but they've shown in their times at Brighton how amazing they can be. We've seen hat-trick from Evan Ferguson against Newcastle, and we've seen Mitoma absolutely rinse defences on kind of a weekly basis. And as I say, he's obviously not been at his best in recent weeks, but how important is it that Brighton keep hold of especially those two players, and how influential can they be in 2024?
Well, Evan Ferguson is now an £100 million player, and Tony Bloom will not want to sell him at all because of the age he's at, the potential he has, and also the quality he's shown whilst being at the Albion. So for us, really, it is all about making sure that we say to these other teams, no, they're not for sale, and kind of shutting the door on any speculation, really, especially with Mitoma as well. There was talks of him potentially going to Manchester City in the summer. That didn't kind of come into fruition, and we just need to make sure that the players that have made results count for us are in the squad for January, because otherwise we're going to be playing with a load of youngsters, and whilst we've got such a good academy, we'll not be able to compete at that level that we're looking for if we do that.
Yeah.
And I think it'll also be something that De Zerbi won't like either if we end up selling a lot of those players, because he wants to build something, and there's every chance that if we do, he'll become frustrated, get an offer from a big club that will keep their players because of the history and the money power that they have, and he'll be gone.
Just in terms of your predictions for the year then, where do you see Brighton finishing in the Premier League to start?
Well, I feel like in terms of where we're at right now, 8th at the time of recording, it's going to be tough for us because of the run of games we've got, and we need to see if we can keep some of the players that have been pivotal to us. I think if we got 7th position, that would be a victory and a really, really successful season for us to have been in Europe and secure Europe in an aspect for the next season would be really cool, and also help us rebuild and still have that influence for the summer transfer window as well, of a bit of football in Europe for players.
And how about the Europa League? How far do you see Brighton going? Is the final in Dublin a realistic aim?
Well, the ticket's already signed, sealed and delivered. But in seriousness, I feel like we can make it to the final. I really do. Brighton are a magical club, and they're a club that can always push through and make sure that they have a fighting chance. And there's every possibility. There's always a possibility with Brighton. There's always a way. And I think that we can get to the final and we can win it. And that's my prediction.
Excellent. Thank you very much for watching Latest TV News. For the latest news from across Sussex, visit sussexworld.co.uk.